All right, so here we go. I'm getting ready to walk you guys through a. Ooh, sorry. Let's go ahead and move my mic. All right, so here is my process, a quick little process. I'm going to walk you guys through a photo editing session, and I'm going to show you the few steps that I go through to be able to get a photo session done. And this is just a small portrait session. It's nothing huge. So the very first thing I do is after we import our photos into Lightroom, the next thing that I do is I go and create a collection. So I hit that button there, create a collection. I've already created a collection for this, which is Mason's first birthday. And then I set as target collection because all the photos that I pick from the session, I want those to be inside of that collection. So that way I have a specific folder set for the photos that we chose to go with. And so usually with babies and kids this age, you will take a lot of the same shot, a whole lot of the same shot, but you'll take a whole lot of the same shot, but you want to find the good one. And some of these look exactly the same. You just need to catch that moment in between laughing and crying and looking away and things like that. So right here is that moment that I caught in between all of that. It was the last photo. I put that in the collection by hitting this little button right here. And now this might not work well for everybody, for everything, but what I usually do at first is I hit the auto button. I allow the software to be able to sort things out for me to an extent, so that way that could possibly be one less thing I have to do on every individual shot. And the software is pretty consistent with how it makes the images look on auto mode. And so as you can see, I am trying to crop off some annoying edges. This right here, I usually just crop off the little, just things that make the picture look a little distracting. In fact, I think I'm going to crop that more just to get that little piece right there off. And I want his eyes somewhere around the rule of third. I know a lot of people may or may not know about the rule of third, but it's usually these little connecting points on the grid. That's where you want your subject closest to. Even if he was right in the middle, you at least want him on the grid lines or the connecting points of the grid, not right here in the middle, not right up here or right over here. You can do that if you want. It really depends on what you're trying to achieve. But on most portraits, you just kind of want them somewhere in that realm. It doesn't have to be all the way perfect. You can try to do that all the time if you want, but trust me, it will not always work out. So yeah, it's just up to you, your style of shooting. Now, okay, so now we have the image cropped. Now with portraits, I try to have a particular kind of crop, which is more of a 4:3 crop, because a lot of portrait size prints, a lot of the prints on like portrait sizes and things like that, they are more in that realm than they are in the full-blown 2:3 realm. So we just kind of crop off the sides and make the subject more of the focus here. And so I beef up the exposure a little bit. A lot of times I do take highlights down a lot. Shadows, we lift those up to an extent. And these pictures here were all natural light, so I didn't use flash or anything, which is very, very rare. But most of the time with kids and being outdoor with kids, it's going to be really hard to position your light and actually get the shot that you want. So sometimes it's better to not go out with so much gear. Just go out, get the picture, and the customer be happy either way. Now you see the vibrant sliders and the saturation sliders are the way that they are. They went like that on auto mode. Now I'm looking at this image. This image does not look too bad, but it's very lacking in contrast. So what I do is I just beef up the contrast to an extent. That might work well with some people's taste. It might not work well with other people's taste. I don't always have to add too much contrast to the image, but this image can actually benefit from some kind of contrast, some kind of punchy look. I used all medium format manual focus lenses. So sometimes the older lenses and things like that, they are a bit lacking in contrast because they just don't really have the modern coatings and things like that. So you just kind of have to add that in there. And that's at 100%. Let's go to 200%. We can see a little bit of chromatic aberration especially right over here on the edge right here. So we just go ahead and take that out by remove chromatic aberration. Boom, that green edge is gone. We're not going to add a profile correction because chances are they might not have the lens available that I need to do the profile correction. And so we're looking at this shot right here, and this shot right here is good. This is an acceptable shot for what we need the images for. And so what I do before I finish a shot is I turn all the surrounding things off by pressing L. This is Adobe Lightroom. Whatever software you use, it might be a little different. And by darkening all the edges and just leaving me with the image, I'm able to see what it really looks like without distraction. And so we go ahead and brighten that back up. And to my knowledge, we don't have enough. I can't see the histogram because the record button is on top of it. So to my knowledge, there's not enough white. There's not enough highlight contrast. So let me go ahead and bring that back. You know, just bring back a little highlight. A little contrast in the whites, not too much in the highlights. And then we just go and take some of that back. Just take some back. Take some contrast back. And that image there is acceptable. It's punchy. It gives me the look of having flash, but I know that it's not there. And then we just look through these. Now, some of these images we probably can't use. That's just the nature of taking pictures of babies. You will get a lot of shots that should have been good that you just can't use, and that's just the way taking pictures of babies work. You know, especially kids around this age, they're so much harder than babies. And then try doing this all in manual focus, and you will realize really quickly that you got a bit of a challenge on your hands. So I'm gonna look at the rest of the shots of him on the swing. I'm gonna start from the back. Usually, if I start from the end of that particular pose, I'm more likely to find the shot that I need, because once I do get the shot that I need, I usually stop there. And so I might use this picture. I might even use this one. Who knows? We could possibly even, use something else. But this one or this one are the two that I would prefer. But I like this one. No, I like this one more because his bow tie is not covering his mouth or his chin as much as that one is. So even though he might have had a better smile in the other one, this is still not a bad shot. If the client never knew that this shot existed, this would be the best picture in the world. So let's just use this shot. Based on our knowledge of being a photographer, we know that certain things in the image can really make it distracting, such as the bow tie almost covering his, almost there to his mouth. And so we just want to use this one right here. We go ahead and look at it at 100%, see if it's in focus. We add that to our collection because that's the image we're going to use. Then we go to auto mode. And then, as you can see, the software does a good enough job at getting me the basic settings that I would probably have used anyway, such as lifting of shadows and pulling down highlights. However, that shadow back there was lifted way too far because I like a little bit of darkness in the background sometimes. Because if the subject and the background are the exact same exposure, then sometimes you can make the image look a little flat and boring. And so we go ahead and do our crop. Just like I said, right? You can't follow the rule of thirds all the time. So even though I might have given you that rule, I've given you that rule as a baseline. And now I'm getting ready to break it because this image calls for it. As you can see, we have two things on the side right here, the swing. We kind of need some form of symmetry going on in order to make this image a little more interesting. And so we can kind of tilt it a little bit just to straighten it all out. And I'm trying my best to make the chains on the swing almost in the exact same spot on each opposite end right there. Straight lines and things like that are very important. They don't always have to be completely straight, but as long as they're straight enough, then that's good. Let's see. So what do we have going on this image? We can do spot removals and things like that, but sometimes these are actually birthmarks. You don't always want to do spot removal all the time because you don't know if you're taking off someone's birthmark. So it's always good to investigate those areas. But I think these might be scratches on his face. So we'll pull that out just because we have a lot of face in here. And then we've got another little scratch right there that we'll go ahead and pull that out as well. We've got a little bit of a thing going on here. This may not clean up too well. Let's see. Because I don't know if I have it. Yeah, that didn't clean up too well. So let's fix that. So sometime we don't have to depend on the automatic functions of the software because it may not do what we want all the time. All right, so there we go. His skin does look a little hard in this right here, so I'm just gonna go ahead and do a skin soften light. I don't want it to be too heavy because at the end of the day, this is a baby and his skin is, his skin looks pretty good the way it is. So we don't want to add too much onto his skin. But I just want to clean up a little bit of those hard spots, those spots that the camera really just made look too sharp. And with kids, you don't always want their faces looking too sharp. However, you can edit any way you like. We do got a bit of a red mark right there on his face, so we'll do a spot removal right there to get that red mark off. But if I can't remove it, it's not that big of a deal. It's just sometimes I would prefer to remove it if I can. And let's see. Yeah, that one cleaned up pretty good. So that's good. This image is actually fine the way it is. There's really nothing wrong with this image. There's nothing else that it needs. I can probably do a medium contrast just to give it that same look and feel that I gave the last image. And there we go. That actually darkened my background just a little bit, and it made it look the way I want. So we can move on to the next image. And like I said, we'll start from the end, figure out what we want. Honestly, I don't like any of these shots. That does not mean that my client would not like them. So I'll pick the one that looks, the most appealing out of them. That one's a little out of focus, a little blurry. However, it's not too out of focus and too blurry to where the picture would just not matter. I'm sure my client will love each and every one of these shots, and so I have to think like them sometimes to an extent when I decide to pick or leave out a certain shot. But as an artist, as a technician, as a photographer, you have to be personally responsible for what images you choose to use to help build your brand. So if it's an image that is, or if it's a particular thing that you know that you don't want your name attached to, as far as like, hey, we got professional pictures done. If the picture doesn't really look, the way that you would want to present it if someone else wanted shots, then sometimes you have to avoid, using those kinds of shots. But this one isn't too bad. A lot of my images are, they have a certain look to them. Not that they look better or worse. It's just that everything you put out has to look the way that you want your brand to be built on. And this one strays away a little, but it's not so far to where it just, it's just something that I won't use. It is a little hazy. It is a little lacking in contrast, so we'll go add medium contrast. I need more contrast in the light areas, and just to kind of bring him out a little. That background back there is blown out. Don't worry about that all the time. Sometimes you just can't fix it. But it is what it is, the blown out background. You can just take the highlights down to an extent. And this is a little trick I'm getting ready to show you guys here. So we're going to go masking, right? And let's go with a brush, a masking brush. And then we'll take that brush and call it the exposure brush, right? So our exposure brush, we probably want like plus 0.1, maybe plus 0.2, and then probably lift the shadows to an extent as well, and then just kind of paint him with that. And so that way we can bring him out some more without affecting the rest of the image while we're at it. All right, so we brought his face out a little more without affecting the rest of the image. That's why we use the masking brush. Yeah, I mean, he's got a little slobber going on and things like that, but he's a baby. What do you expect? Okay, and so this image right here is good. I love this image. However, because that background is blown out back there, sometimes I might use a bit of a vignetting, just a bit of a vignetting. And then after going with a bit of a vignetting, sometimes I have to just pop the exposure up just a bit. Now his face is pretty bright now, and it's bright enough to be happy with. So we're going to go with that image right there. Next image, we have him right here on the spider. She really loved this image. I did too. He wasn't really cooperating that well, which is, like something to expect, especially if you bring a child to a playground. So then we're just going to go ahead and crop him. And like I said, you can't always obey the rule of thirds, but you can try. I would like to have a bit of a lines of symmetry and things like that going on in this image. just because of what we have. And then let's level the spider's eyes a bit. There we go. So you know what we do? We hit the auto button, let the software figure things out for us to an extent. The shadows are all right. My issue is his face is pretty red. So we're just going to go with a brush. And it's not that it's pretty red, it's also a little dark. So we're going to go to 0.2 on the exposure. Oh, and I do want to emphasize the importance of making sure you calibrate your computer monitor, or get you a computer monitor that shows you a bare minimum of 100% sRGB. If you can find one that's 100% Adobe RGB, you would be in good hands. But you want to be able to see what colors are really there, so that way you know what to take off and what to put in. And like I said, his face is a little red. Maybe it might just be a little magenta. So we're just going to take our tint slider and just change the tint just a little bit. And his face is not so pink anymore. It does have a bit of a color to it, but it's just not as pink as what it was before. And so this image right here, we can live with this image, not complain about it whatsoever. If we want more contrast in the lights, we can have a little less contrast in the darks, lift the contrast in the shadows, and we have a pretty good daytime looking shot right here. We're not going to do anything else to that. We're just going to call that what it is. We like that image. So on these particular shots, he was really kicking and screaming for his mom. And so I told her that if we want to get another shot, you might have to hold him. So we came up with this right here, and we're going to see how this works. I love that picture right there. That is the shot, but we're going to see what else we have. Add that to the collection, and let's keep going. That one looks even better to me. Well, it doesn't really matter. They both look good, but we can only have one. We can't have two of the same shot. I mean, we can, but it doesn't make sense. And on these ones, he weren't really smiling as much as he was before. So let's go back to the shot that we had. There it is right there. And just look, I mean, on this particular image, I think I was using my Pentax 45 to 85 millimeter lens on the Sigma FP with a speed booster, which would turn my full frame sensor into a medium format sensor. And you can kind of really see how that medium format look is. Like, this background looks so huge. And this was probably like a 50 millimeter field of view. And I probably shot this at 85. And so we've got a lot of chromatic aberration on his shirt right here. Let's remove that. Let's hit the button. We took it out to an extent. We're not going to worry too much about the rest of it, just as long as we get some of it cleaned up. And this image is lacking a bit in punchiness. It's not as punchy as I would like it to be. And let's just go with the medium contrast, and we can bring up more contrast in the lights. I like the way that looks, the more contrast in the lights. And let's see if we... Yeah, sometimes just a bit of playing around. You can't look at every shot and say, we need this, that, and that. It takes a bit of playing around. Now with this image, I'm noticing that it's too red. I don't like how much red is in this shot at all. So sometimes I just go and play with the color just to see if that's the right color I need to take down. And it's actually coming out pretty good. But before we affect color, let's just make sure it's not our white balance. Okay, so it is color. So we've got red, we've got magenta. Taking down the magenta does nothing. And pulling back on the red actually does help. Okay, so I went on ahead and pulled back on the red. We do our famous crop, just to give it a more medium format sensor kind of look, because that's kind of how they always crop them, or that's how the aspect ratio on the sensor is. And plus, this crop fits more into photo prints than the full-blown 2x3. And like I said, you can't always obey the rule of thirds, but I got the baby right here on this connecting point, I mean on this line. She's at this rule of third line, and then my tree is perfectly in the middle to give me, you know, that more symmetrical look. It makes your image look like you intended to shoot it that way. And that's the reason I shoot my images the way I do, because it allows me to be more intentional. Because if you have to slow down and manually focus, you may as well slow down and compose right. So there we go. That image does not look too bad. I don't think we need to do anything else to that shot, except I really do wish we had a little more going on in the clouds, but you know, woulda, coulda, shoulda. All right, so yeah, we're gonna end that one here, and we've got 5 good shots in our collection. And then this, I was using 80 to 160 on this one right here, and I was just kind of following her, carrying him, and I just wanted to see what we can get. Just, you know, just following her and carrying him. We didn't get anything too exciting, but this right here is going to be the more exciting shot right here. And I don't really want one with his binky in his mouth, but if that's all we can get, then that's what we'll do. I've got shots of her and him, but I want to skip over to the bridge areas. You can see we threw some leaves there for him to play with because, yeah, he wasn't having it. He had to play with something, you know, and it had to be something on the ground because that's kind of where he was. We didn't want to bring any, you know, introduce any toys in the image or things like that because we kind of just wanted him, a natural him being himself. This is his first birthday images. And so let's go to the end, find a good shot of him. That's actually a pretty nice photo. However, I just don't like the way that I missed this brick right here in the background. But if I can't have it my way, I'll go with what we have. So we're going to save that because we don't know if we want to use it. And then we'll look at other shots like of him just kind of in the zone, you know. But I think we'll go ahead and use the one that I picked out at the end. So yeah, we'll use that one. This one right here. And what I'll, no, it's not that one. It's this one right here. And so we go hit the auto mode. The software kind of flattens things out to an extent so I can have a better place to start. Trying to straighten this up, and then we do our 4:3 crop. You don't have to do that on every image. I do it because like it gives me the look that I like, and it also fits better in photo prints. So yeah, look at that background. I really love the way that background looks. So I'm just gonna bring up the shadows. I like the highlights, but on this image, I haven't done this on other images, but I'll add a little bit of clarity because the background looks way too mushy, and so does he. Let's see if it's sharp. Yeah, it's sharp enough. It's not completely in focus, but it's not completely out of focus either, and we still have a nice image that that she can go home with. We've got something in the reds I'm not really feeling. It might just be the color profile of the camera or the fact that I more than likely shot these at Adobe RGB. So we did go with Adobe RGB in these images, and as you can see, the Adobe RGB color space does have a lot more red in it, and it looks better on prints. However, when it comes to digital, most things will be displayed in sRGB color space anyway. So you can always take Adobe RGB and knock it down to sRGB. But you can't take sRGB and knock it down to it, and bring it back to Adobe RGB. The only issue is that if you're not able to see what colors are there, then your images can look really, really weird when you do decide to change them. And this image is good. We're going to go with this. I may just put a bit of a vignette in the background just to kind of, yeah, now that looks a lot better. So we're going to roll with that one there. And I did skip some. I'm sure you saw that. And I skipped some for a reason because I wanted to stay on track because we kind of went and did something in between and then went back to the original shot that we were trying to get. And now this one, even though he was more so playing around, I can't necessarily use these shots because we just really couldn't get it in the way that we needed to get it. All right, so let's go ahead and get the rest of the images done. Now this image here doesn't look too bad. It is a bit out of focus, but at least he had a pretty decent face. As far as it being out of focus, sometimes you can't fix it. Sometimes the kid is moving a little too fast for the shutter speed that you need. So like I said, we'll do what we did before. Hit the auto mode, let the software sort out what we need, add a little texture to the image. And then what we'll do is pick up a brush. And then we'll add texture to the brush and put some texture back in his eyes, because that's what we need in focus the most. We can't fix that. We can't fix out of focus, but we can make it sharper if we need to. Now, to a lot of super duper techie photographers, a lot of them would give me crap about an image being out of focus. However, I've done this, for so long, over and over, especially doing kids, to where the parent doesn't always care if the image is slightly blurry, as long as they get this. This is what they're looking for. Most of the time, this probably won't be printed any bigger than 8x10. I have a trick that I use to kind of sort of fix out of focusness. It's not necessarily fixing it, but when I export these images, I export them in about 80, maybe 75%. So that way you can't zoom in to 100% to see how far out of focus it might be. So if you can't zoom in that far, the image is already big enough to print, 20 by 30 if you wanted to. But if I eliminate a little bit of if I eliminate a little bit of resolution, you can't really zoom in all the way to tell what was there or what wasn't there. And I've done this with stock images that were originally declined from being out of focus or just not being sharp. And so what I do is, if you get 24 megapixels, right, and you smash that 24 megapixels down to about 18, the image would look sharper than what it is, because you can't really go in that far to tell if it's out of focus or not. And this is a trick that a lot of photographers should learn, because you can save yourself a lot of trouble by just not giving them full resolution. Because chances are, you give them full resolution, they'll never use full resolution. So as long as they can have this, then that's really all that matters. I really don't want to crop this image, but I've done the rest of them that way. I may as well do this one that way. And so I want to bring him closer to this grid point right there. However, I like this tree back here, but that tree back there, if I put in too much tree, it'll look a little distracting and it'll take away from the weeping willow leaves that he's enjoying playing with right now. And so that image right there is good. That's good enough to roll with. That's nothing to complain over. We'll save that to our collection. We went with those images. And then I did skip a set. And I skipped these at first because I wasn't necessarily happy with any of them because of how close her head is to the edge. You don't want heads that close to the edge, because if the client ever has to print these images and they have to be cropped in a certain way, then you can potentially crop off that head. And plus, the head being that far up there is very distracting. And so the images that I did like technically are images that I didn't like artistically. Like, I wasn't so happy with this shot because I would have rather him been smiling with no pacifier. However, the client might be happy with this shot just because it's her and her baby. You know what I mean? So sometimes we can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater, because you never know what might please another person. Just because it's not pleasing to you doesn't mean that you have to judge everybody else's perception on it. And so I go ahead and crop that down. I like this little pillar right here, so I'm going to keep it, but I want them in the middle. And they're more up here on this line than they are right here in the center. So that's another period in time in your editing when you can break the rule of thirds. You don't have to follow the rules all the time just because they exist. You have to know the rules enough to know when you can throw them away or bend them ever so slightly. The background and the subject look too, there's too much dynamic range going on here. The background's too bright. The subject is just a little too dark. And so what I want to do is, actually, let's do something else. On this shot right here, my background is mostly green. I want my subject that bright, but just not bright compared to the background. And so what I do is I go to the greens and I just pull the luminance down in the greens because I want that a little darker back there. Sometimes you can get a little creative and, and change it up. They might actually like this. You never know. I do this a lot with fall images. I do this a lot with summer images that I want to look more like fall. I just play around with the colors and change the leaves, and it'll give you another feeling of where you might be. But on this shot, no, the greens look a little bluish. So let's make that a little more natural greenish. And that's good. Darken that down. Actually, we don't have to darken it down too much because I can always add a bit of a vignette back there. And then what I do is I pull the feather all the way down so I can see what I'm working with. And so I might have to, yep, that's good right there. So now I know what I'm working with here. And then let's bring them in some. Then we put our feather back where it was. So now, that's the shot that we want out of this one right here. That looks really awesome. However, I still feel as though the lighting isn't too appealing on my subject. And so I'm going to go and hit the medium contrast button. It brings my background to where I would have wanted it. And then I'm just going to put a little contrast in the lights. Bring up the contrast in the shadows because the subject had just a little too many shadows for me. I want to pull down the highlights ever so slightly. And then, like I said earlier, whenever I do a vignette, sometimes I want to just beef up my exposure, look at the shot for what it is. I still feel as though there's a little too something bright on my subject, so let's go ahead and add my brush. We're going to go ahead and pull down highlights and then lift up contrast. And then I might throw in a little clarity just to make them stand out a little more. Because like right up in here where the baby is, there's just a little too much brightness going on. In fact, I don't like the clarity, but I do like the pulling down of the highlights. But I'll just do another brush. So the pulling down of the highlights right there on the baby, and then we'll add one more brush, and then that's when I work on her face. Wait a minute, let's fix that. Okay. Alright, so let's go ahead and add one more brush. Sorry, I did that wrong. So we add one more brush. I'm really just starting to get more familiar with the new version of Lightroom here. So, alright, so let's add one more brush. She has a lot of redness on her face, a little more shadow than I would want. Actually, let's work down here in this area too, because that looks a little too hard and crispy for me. So the redness on her face, right? So let's go ahead and bring up that shadow on her face. We brought that shadow up, and then that redness on her face. We fixed that like this by just changing the tint ever so slightly. And it just makes her look a little more natural in the image. And so if you want, we can actually look at a before and after. Don't laugh at me because I can never ever figure out how to do this right away. Sometimes it takes a whole lot of playing around in Lightroom to be able to figure out what it is I want to, how it is I'm going to look at it before and after. So that's the selected photo, and that's the candidate. No, how do we go to before and after? Let's go back. Compare. I don't want to compare two different images. I just want to look at before and after. Hit the reset button. That's what it looks like before. Hit Control Z. That's what it looks like after. And that's a nice image to be able to give to my client. And we are done with this shoot. I told her that we have about 10 shots, but we actually have a lot less than that. We are at 7. And I think that that is acceptable for what she knows took to get the image, the images done that we do have. And yeah, I wasn't able to save any of these ones here because he was kind of throwing a fit. She might like this, so I'll go ahead and give her that one too. And so the images I'm not really feeling, I usually do last. She might like it. Let's see if it's in focus. It's not completely in focus, but it's in focus enough for her to be happy with it. And like I said, this was an image I wasn't going to give her in the first place, but we're still going to do it anyway. If she don't like it, then she just doesn't like it. And I understand, not everything in the shoot is going to be something that someone likes. So then we just go ahead and look at all the shots that we have and see them for what they are. Hit the L button. That's beginning. Oh, I forgot to crop that one back here. Yeah, this one I'll go ahead and crop in a minute. We still have a bit of orange in this shot that I'm not really feeling. So we'll go and fix that. I love this image right here. This is the image, like this is the picture that I'm probably going to post. I just love it. But I'll go back to that one image where I had a little bit of orange that I wasn't feeling too much. This one right here. I don't like the orange in this shot. So let's, and on this one we did pull down the red. Then we can kind of adjust the orange. Okay, that's acceptable. Skin looks good. There was some orange in this one that I wasn't feeling too well after being able to look at it at after being able to see it on a after being able to see it a little bit bigger. I didn't really know what to call it, but yep, so the orange in that one is gone. As you can see, that image looks a lot more pleasing. So let's just go back and look at all of them again. Hit the L button, darken everything. Now I'm looking at this image and there's not enough exposure on his face. So before we start to find other problems in the rest of the photos, let's go ahead and fix the one that we're looking at right now. There's not enough exposure on this baby's face. So let's fix that with a brush. We'll call that exposure at plus 0.1. You know, just that slight change would make a huge difference. Plus 0.1. There we go. And now let's throw in some contrast, and then we can be happy with that shot. So now let's go back and look. This is how it works all the time. Still have to crop that one, I'll do it. I don't think this one's bright enough. Let's fix it. There we go. I think that looks good. This one. I don't think this one's bright enough. Let's fix it. Now that looks good. This one. I don't think this one's bright enough. It might be. Let's see what we have. Now that looks more happy. This one's perfect. That one might not be bright enough. Let's make this a little more happy. That one looks a lot more happy. This one. This one's good. So we have to crop this image. 4:3 crop. Let's get rid of that sock. We don't need that sock. There we go. And even though this wasn't really one of the images I liked, that doesn't mean my client wouldn't like it. And this would be a memory that lasts forever. So I have to really be careful about what I call a good shot or not, because this might make somebody happy for the remainder of their lives. And I have to consider that, and so do you. You know, like sometimes as photographers, we have to understand, just because it's out of focus, just because it wasn't composed right, just because the face didn't look the way you would have preferred, like I would have preferred to not have his hand in his mouth. But guess what? He's a baby. That's what he does. So, like, you know, a lot of times we just have to go with what we have to work with. And these images look really, really nice. And this will be the second time I've done first birthday pictures for this particular person. Oh, I'm missing a shot. I am missing a shot. So let's go to our previously imported images and let's find that one shot that I'm missing. I'm sure you know what it is. The one I worked on for so long to make perfect. And then we'll go back into the collection. So now we've got 9 images. I thought we had 7. We have 9. I was missing one. And that's this one. So let's look at this one on big screen or on, you know, a bigger view mode. Let's get rid of all the edges here. And now we can see that one for what it is. That one for what it is. There we go. And that's the end of our photo session. We have nothing else to do, nothing else to add, nothing else to take away. We can go ahead and send these to the client right now. So now I'm going to show you how I export them. So I select all of them, right click, export, export. And we want to put in a specific folder this record button right here is in my way of me being able to see what I need. Okay, so now let's choose the folder that we want. We want Lee Corey Photography. Select folder. Mason's first birthday subfolder. This will be my second Mason's first birthday, so I have to call it something else. Let's see, Mason's first birth. I've done a Mason's first birthday party. That was a different Mason. Mason's first birthday portraits. So that way I can, oh, and then so we go ahead and change the name of the shots right there. So you can change your file name to whatever you want. And then so I export them at full quality, JPEG, sRGB, and then at 75%. You don't want to give them 100% because if you had an error that you couldn't fix, you don't want them to be able to zoom in into full resolution to see it. However, even at 75%, let's figure this out. Let's do the math, okay? So, simple percentage, 75% of 24 is 20. No, I put 27, sorry, is 18. So we still have 18 megapixels. If I didn't crop anything and put these out at 75%, they would be knocked down to 18 megapixels, which would actually give you the illusion of more detail. So we go ahead and export. Then after we export, we have to see what they look like. Because I shot in Adobe RGB, edited them in Adobe RGB, and I'm exporting in sRGB, you want to go back and see what it is you really have after you're all done. Now, because I did shoot these in Adobe RGB, I can still re-export these in Adobe RGB and use them for print and give more vibrant colors. So we have to go and see what it is that we have. Pictures, Lee Corey photography, and we're gonna find, yeah, don't worry about how I named everything, I'm sorry. Mason's first birthday portraits. And now let's just look at it, see what we have to work with. That looks presentable. That looks presentable. And so I'm gonna go ahead and make this on a Google Drive folder. And let me know if you guys have any questions. I'm sorry this video was a bit long, but a lot of people ask me, what do I do when I edit my photos? Now, editing my images is not everything that go into how I get the shots that I get. I usually make them happen in camera, and then editing backs me up. So maybe one of these days I'll show you guys what I do in camera and then edit, so that way you can get a better idea of how it works. And so let's just go to one of these shots that I exported at 75%, right? So this one, if you zoom into that one, that's as far as you can see. That's as far as you can see at 100%. However, you can push yourself to zoom in more, but if this was any bigger resolution, you would have been able to see that a lot sooner. And let's see how many megapixels this one is after the crop and after the reduction in size. We're working with 4,000 by 3,000. That would give us that's a 12 megapixel image. And a 12 megapixel image is not bad at all, especially if the end result might be just the internet or laptop background or 8 by 10 or even something slightly bigger than that. 12 megapixel image is not bad at all. So there we go. I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up, and you guys let me know if you have any questions, and I really thank you for watching. You guys have a blessed day.